Only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We are excited to hear about Microsoft Flow and Dynamics NAV, a flow review, and it will be presented today by Innovia Consulting's Jeff Pergolski. Jeff has been with Innovia since 2008, so he just celebrated his 9-year anniversary, so congratulations. And he's been with NAV since 2009. And so we're going to start the presentation in just a couple moments, but before we start, there's a couple of quick pieces of housekeeping. First, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box, and we will get them called out and answered for you. Secondly, we do record this in all of our webinars, so if you want to view the recording or have someone else in your organization see it, you can find it later this afternoon at innovia.com. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Angie. Feel free to jump in and let me know if people have questions. I guess usually we save it to the end. I'm just going to mark myself as do not disturb on Skype. Let's get going. The webinar today is on Microsoft Flow. For any of you that have been following along with the development and release of Microsoft Flow, you know that it's been around now for about 2 years, released in what Microsoft refers to as preview mode, unlike maybe like Google that releases products in beta mode. Microsoft releases products in preview, and so it has been growing within the ecosystem of NAV as sort of this this fun to play with, if this then that sort of basic programming building block. And so what I'm gonna do today is kind of go over at a high level what Flow is, maybe present a couple of use cases, and I guess most excitingly for us at Innovia, the Flow connector for NAV was introduced with NAV 2017 with that release. So we can automate some very simple tasks in using Flow in NAV, and so I'm going to show you sort of what that looks like. So let me just go on here. I'm gonna present myself here. So that's me, and I felt it necessary because of how poorly behaved she is to include my dog, my puppy Simone, who's a 6-month-old pug. And I apologize before she makes any background noise that will be annoying. So that is Simone. She's going to be here riding shotgun with me through this presentation. So session objectives, we're going to provide an overview of Flow, discuss how it can be used with NAV, and then kind of show you how simple it is to make some Flow objects. The agenda, what is Flow, where does it fit in, review the steps for building a Flow in NAV, and then we're going to show a Flow in NAV and take some questions. So I've got a fairly thick slide deck that we should be able to click through pretty quickly, but I think it's important to understand at a high level what Flow is. For any of you that are using Office 365 for your email, odds are that if you look at the waffle that shows up in the upper left-hand corner of your login screen, that you might even see a Flow button there, and have been curious, maybe you've even clicked through and done some stuff with it. So basically at a high level, Microsoft Flow is an if this then that sort of automation, meaning if something happens, then do something. And so at a really basic level, it is like a 2-step program. So what can you do in 2 steps? Not anything that's terribly complicated, but if you think to what your employees are doing within your organization, it's not designed to be a fully automated workflow solution, and we're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end. where maybe you're receiving a PO and you're using the OCR service to push that into NAV automatically and create the PO, etc. It's not going to handle anything that complicated. But if you think about what some of your people do, maybe in the production floor, or it's needing to order something when a bin is empty. If you've got maybe it is a fail safe so that when production planning and your purchase orders aren't being fulfilled as they need, or people aren't doing their job, or if you run into a load of bad stock that maybe could happen occasionally, and you want to set up an automated process for someone on the floor to make a request within NAV for a specific item or raw material, and you don't want to have them have to go into NAV and do that. Setting up Flow potentially would be a lifesaver. So if this, then that. There's actually a company that's been around quite a while. And their logo is down here in the bottom left, the IFTTT. They have been around much longer than Microsoft in this space, in the simple programming or task automation space, with a free product that connects to lots of services. Unfortunately, it doesn't connect to Dynamics NAV, which isn't to say that you couldn't maybe leverage it to do some stuff along with NAV, but it doesn't have a supported connector with Dynamics NAV. The other one is Zapier, and they are more in the enterprise space. They've got connectors that connect to Dynamics CRM with Microsoft and a lot of Office 365 and Azure products, but again, nothing with a built-in supported connector to Dynamics NAV of any version. So Zapier is a paid-for service, and we'll get into where Microsoft fits in here with the consumer version or the paid-for service, or I guess as some people refer to it, probably as a freemium service where it's free, but there's some premium content that if you want to leverage, you have to pay for. So Microsoft's hasn't invented anything in this space. They've just made it very easy to integrate into Dynamics NAV. So Alan and I presented on Flow at NAVUG Summit last year, and at the time we didn't have a NAV connector, so it wasn't nearly as exciting for us to show. But Alan actually came up with this really good analogy about what's it like, and he uses experience with
Jeff, you cut out there. I apologize, everyone. We're having some technical difficulty. Be just a moment.
Hey, Angie, can you just let me know that we are back online here?
Now we are. Microsoft
Okay.
Flow and overview is what I see on the screen.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you share at what point you lost me? Because I was just talking away here.
About 2 minutes back.
Oh, geez. Okay, so I am going to go back one slide to. All right. Okay.
Right
so
there.
You did not see the slide? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm sorry about that interruption. I wish I could blame that on my dog, but I'm not sure which which presentation gremlin got me there. So, so how do you teach 5th and 6th graders to program robots? You keep it very simple and very basic, and that is what Microsoft is doing with Flow. In the Lego Mindstorm world, there are action blocks, blocks that do things, make noise, move forward, turn, and then there are flow blocks, these represented in orange, that control the flow of the program. And so they are the logic behind that connect the action steps. And that is what Microsoft Flow is actually exactly what it is. So the question that Microsoft came up with and tried to answer is, how do you teach non-programmers to build automation tools? Now, as much as I embrace my my nerdness and geekness, I'm not a programmer and have no formal training in programming, so it fascinates me to be able to leverage the power of an application like Dynamics NAV to do something with. And but without that programming knowledge, it's pretty tough to do. We've got a lot of end users that are in that same space where there's something that they know, they can see the data in NAV, they want to automate the process, but it's too expensive a proposition for them to either hire a programmer themselves, to leverage a partner and pay for their development expertise. So things just don't get done. And Microsoft has realized that, so they put Flow in place along with Microsoft Power Apps. So Flow is a building block, if you will, a Lego to part of the more powerful solution from Microsoft, which is Power Apps. And Power Apps combines the simple automation tools of Flow with the analytics of Power BI to make some pretty cool custom apps. And even though we're not going to dig into Power Apps this webinar, I'm certain that we are going to present on that sometime in the next couple months. So if you're interested in that, check back. I have been through Microsoft Power Apps training. I've created an app using Flow and Power BI and some of the Microsoft Azure and Cortana Intelligence stuff. It's and again, I have no programming experience. So Flow is the building block, can be used completely self-contained on its own, doesn't need to be part of a Power App, but it is sort of the logic blocks. If we're going to go back to that Lego Mindstorm, it is the logic blocks that can connect applications that you create. So basically, sort of an easy generic scenario to what Flow is, something like getting an email notification when a file is added to your Dropbox. Now, for those of you that use Dropbox, you may say, well, I already have the app that notifies me, whether it's on my phone or my desktop. And certainly, I don't want to suggest that Flow has some revolutionary functionality that is going to completely amaze you. But if you think about how powerful that is to be able to connect all these different systems, and we'll take a look at the number of different systems that Flow can connect. In this scenario, we're using Office 365 to send mail to an email account that is linked to a Dropbox. So we're combining Microsoft and Dropbox, and we're doing it without any code. So on one hand, as you can see here in the graphic, there's a few boxes for you to fill out with information that in terms of how it's relevant, what you want to do. Again, this isn't going to allow you to really do anything too complicated or dynamic in terms of describing what the file is or pulling attributes from that file, etc. If you want to get into a little bit more advanced state, then you're going to create a Power App using this basic Flow building block. But Flow would essentially recognize a change of state in Dropbox, being that there's a new file created, and then send out an email. So sort of the things that lend themselves to Microsoft Flow are things like notifications, file synchronization, collecting data, building lists, if you will, and then automating approvals. I might argue that that NAV 2016 and especially 2017 has, you know, the approval stuff pretty well figured out. So odds are you wouldn't be leveraging Flow to do that, but maybe you've got another system that is working alongside a NAV in your organization that you need approvals on. Maybe you're going to maybe you've got a SharePoint calendar that your employees use to request PTO time on, and maybe you want to set an approval process there so that when someone creates an entry, it creates an approval request with their manager, and being able to set up that logic and setting up the SharePoint calendar in a way that the appropriate managers get notified of for their employees is about the most complicated part of setting that up. So the nice thing about Flow is that there are hundreds of pre-built templates, and those templates we'll dig into that and show you, but basically, you know, as you see in the slide, a lot of SharePoint to email notifications, Google Calendar to email notifications. So it is independent. It's not just a Microsoft ecosystem thing. It goes sort of along the lines of where the application is going, and you know, how, as Microsoft in each release of Dynamics NAV makes it a more robust product that is more easily connected to. When you think back to the old versions of NAV 2009 sooner, like any time you were reaching into the application from outside, it required either your own development staff or a partner to help create that connection, to build that XML port, and to tweak that OData. Microsoft is building that into the product, and so one of the tools that they're going to allow you to interact with Dynamics NAV using is Microsoft Flow. Now this is going to get a little bit ridiculous because the overview of the number of services that Microsoft Flow integrates. 32 on a screen. Certainly all the stuff on the top row, SharePoint, OneDrive, a lot of Microsoft stuff, SQL Server. It's important to understand it doesn't necessarily have to be a Dynamics NAV SQL database. So running SQL on any other application, you could set a flow to get into that and interact with that database and records and tables in that database. But a whole bunch of, so there's 32 here. I'm going to go through here. I think, let's see, this is my second slide. Salesforce. I will mention that if you can see, I'm not sure what resolution you're looking at this, some of these connections have the word premium underneath them. That is something new since the product has been out of preview mode for the last couple months. But so this is the second screen, third screen, fourth screen. We've got stuff like Instagram and MailChimp, LinkedIn. Fifth screen and sixth screen. So this sixth screen wasn't, but we're pushing almost 200 connections that are built in, and that isn't to say that you have to use a built-in connection, because one of our the PSA tool that we use alongside Dynamics NAV is ConnectWise, and we had one of our, unfortunately, when it was one of our developers, it should have been someone on the sales team that's not as smart like me do it, but one of our developers used Flow to interact with our ConnectWise to automate a process, and just not because it was filling a gap in functionality, but just because he wanted to see what he could do with it. So you are not limited to the almost 200 built-in connections. If you've got an application that has a programming, a common programming language that you can have access to, odds are that Flow will interact with it. But as I was alluding to, now that Flow is fully released, it's no longer completely free. So it is, for the most part, and certainly for anything that most of our customers who are dipping their toe in the water would want to look at in terms of evaluating Flow, it would be free. But there are some plans, if you're going to start to leverage it heavily, there are some Flow plans that go along with Office 365 accounts. And here you see that, so the free version of Microsoft Flow for Office 365 gives you 2,000 runs per month, unlimited Flow creation, and 5-minute checks. And you can connect to embedded Office 365 or Dynamics services. So essentially what that line means is that there are no premium connections included in the free version, which sort of makes sense. To hit these other metrics and what they mean, a 5-minute check means that it will only check for Flow conditions every 5 minutes. So it is not an instant response sort of system. So let's say you wanted to, gosh, I don't know why you do it, but you wanted the Flow button to use your Skype for Business phone number to dial 911 in an emergency. You certainly wouldn't want the free version because it's going to wait 5 minutes. Now, depending on where it is in its 5-minute check, maybe it would be in 30 seconds that it would send out that call, but it could be as long as 5 minutes. So the free version only checks for Flow conditions every 5 minutes. You do have unlimited Flow creations, and you are limited to 2,000 runs per month. So if if people want to manually create a Flow or create something in NAV, or any of these other services, you are limited to 2,000. So, but again, if you look at the prices that we're looking at here, it's not terribly expensive. So Flow Plan 1, that is $5 a month, gives you 4,500 runs, unlimited Flow creation. It checks every 3 minutes rather than 5, and it does support all the premium connectors. And then finally, Flow Plan 2 at $15 a month gives you 15,000 runs, unlimited Flow, and checks every 1 minute, as well as adding on the ability to add organizational policy settings. So as we get into the demo, you'll see that you don't need too much in terms of access to set this up, but ultimately, if you want to start to institute some policies on what data within your organization, let's say you want to have connections to NAV, but you want to put some policies around there in terms of which tables can be interacted with, you can start to, you need the organizational policy settings that Flow Plan 2 gives you. In terms of those premium connections, these are, and let me see here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's about 60 connections that are premium. Dynamics NAV is not one of those, of course, but getting into some of the competition, actually, if you look, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, those are premium connections here. If you want to automate, so for instance, questions that maybe are typed in the chat window, Flow could be used to capture those and send them in an email to support staff. But these are the premium connections. So out of the 200 connections we showed, about a third of them are premium connections now that require you at least have the $5 subscription of Flow Plan 1. Again, just some other, just a comparison chart here, and this webinar is being recorded, as well as the slide deck available for those who want that. It's sort of a nice, not that anyone would need to probably go through the slide deck, but having a single point of all this information collected sometimes is helpful. But this chart just shows all the data relevant to the different plans, from the free plan to the Office 365 included plan, and then than Flow Plan 1 and 2. There are SLAs associated with every paid for version except for the free one, so you can count on the system to be alive and working 99.9% of the time. From a management perspective, being able to invite others to share ownership and run flows is something that is interesting. So if you have a flow guru that is on your team and starts to want to play with this and figure it out, they can use their Office 365 account to create a flow and then actually share it across your entire organization if you think that is that's appropriate. And you can do that with every version that is at least at an Office 365 level. So Office 365, just so I'm clear, this the Office 365 version of Flow that is included with an Office 365 subscription gives you more than someone who doesn't have an Office 365. And obviously, if you don't have an Office 365 subscription, it's pretty hard for you to share it within your organization, because how would we know what your organization was? So again, there's just some fine print about how the runs are aggregated across your organization and some of the finer points. But this is a screen cap from an older instance of Flow that I was using that had Dropbox email notifications configured, SharePoint lists modifications. We actually did a last year before the election, we actually did one where we created an email notification every time someone tweeted and hashtagged one of the candidates. I got Hillary and Alan got Trump. But essentially, it was fun to watch your inbox fill with an unbelievably large number of emails, which the guy, I'm trying to think of what the right word is. If you wanted to have some fun with this and you knew someone's email password, you could set something that you knew was ridiculously trending on Twitter. You need to know their email name and password in order to initiate that email, but otherwise they'd know it was you. But you could create something to fill a coworker's inbox with junk email if you really had it in for them. So again, push notifications for important emails. That is something that is using a Power App to do. I can tell because there is a Power App icon down here, and so we're going to get into what is involved with configuring a flow for NAV, because it's really a very simple and basic amount of information that you need. All right, and so the first thing that you've got to do is configure the NAV connector. And that connection requires the OData feed URL and a username, password, and company. And that is actually all it takes. So when you start to think about this, how far back will Flow work? Will Flow work with anything before NAV 2017? In theory, using the OData feed that was present in 2013, I believe. So I haven't tested it on any version other than 2017, so I can't say for sure. I did try to verify that and failed to get verification, but it could work as far back as 2013 if you've got your OData feed configured. I'm not sure with security settings. You have to have your security settings made so that a simple username and password will access it, but it could work as far back as that. But that is all that is required. Flow takes care of the connector takes care of encrypting that data between Flow and NAV, so that you know that you're in a very secure place, even though it's all you need to know are these 4 pieces of information to connect NAV to your Flow. It is still secured through encryption. And then once you configure the NAV connector, then you start to look at what can you do in NAV and how can Flow interact with it. So short of just this is the built-in connector, we're not doing any custom stuff here. on a create item, so creating item, all you need to know is the table name, and then row. So you're basically telling the system where you're going to create this item, where it's going to be put in the SQL database, and so that is an example. This would be an example of potentially, and one of the scenarios that I think it really lends itself to is creating a purchase order. Again, stuff, inventory on the floor. You need something, and you don't want to have your person on the floor fill out a requisition worksheet or log into NAV and create a new PO, or call someone and potentially that person isn't at their desk to take the information down. So creating, and again, it's not going to be any deep logic involved in this. It's going to be, all this stuff would need to be predefined, but creating an item, all you need is the table name and rows, and it is going to put in whatever your allowable input is on those tables. Again, just like create an item, delete an item, same thing, same information required. And then get an item. So if you want to, let's say you want to be able to have someone push a button, and when I say push a button, I'm sort of talking virtually, but maybe physically, and get information on inventory. So you want flow to go into NAV to a specific table and row ID and pull out that information and report it back in either an app that's on their phone or tablet, or maybe an email message or some other notification. Getting an item is something that is supported, so you can create, delete, get, and then there are some more, a few more parameters with the get item, or I guess update item. So that would be update would possibly be change. So if you are changing, I'm going to show an example. I've made a flow here for changing a credit limit, and even though there's some stuff that can be done within NAV to do that, changing an item again is something that is supported in the connector. Again, there are some optional parameters that we can get into, where if you want to get a little more complicated. And in terms of, if you are asking for information and you want a top count of total number of entries based on your query, or you want to skip some, you can put some optional parameters in. When you start to do that, to me, it starts to look a little bit like code. It's almost like running some PowerShell scripts, in my opinion, and it starts to get a little more complicated there, which isn't nearly as fun for non-technical users like me on the sales team. So I tend to stay away from that. But there are a few optional parameters that can be added through the NAV connector. Here's a record deletion. So you want to know if someone is deleting things and not even using NAV security is certainly a way that you'd be aware of these, turning on audits, etc. But let's say you're not comfortable in that and you want something easy. Microsoft Flow can handle that with just the same basic information of table name and row ID, filter, query, etc. that you've got in any of the other interactions. Again, here's the record modified, strings, and record deleted. So sort of the overview as it relates, and I mentioned this earlier, but when does Microsoft Flow shine compared to the inherent workflows that are built into NAV? That's a question that we've got over the last year. When should we use Flow versus NAV workflow? And this is just the built-in workflow. not the not anything above and beyond like some of the ISVs like Agili's or one of those that actually takes workflows within NAV to the next level. So in terms of just some rules of thumb, when does Flow shine compared to NAV? If you're going to connect services and data outside of NAV, so certainly NAV workflow has the ability to send some notifications, etc. But it's not going to interact with another database without some custom programming. So Flow already has those connectors to nearly 200 data services already. If you only need credentials for the service or data object, so you don't necessarily need as much information, nor do you have as much security with that account, but that might be a reason to use Flow. You don't want to have any job setup on the server. Like the workflows that run in NAV require a job queue to be running, and then from a Flow standpoint, only requires an Office 365 account. So again, we're looking at NAV from a licensing perspective. How does it interact with Flow? If you are monitoring information, so you've got a non-NAV employee that's on the shop floor and he wants to create something in NAV through an automated flow. Creating that purchase order is going to require a NAV account, but being able to post that would be someone else's job. So it wouldn't create a posted document, but and a document pending approval would certainly be something that could be done. And the fact that it only requires an Office 365 account means that you're not able to legally interact with NAV in any substantive manner, but you can certainly consume the NAV data without interacting with it. So if you're looking at inventory or doing something along those lines, where you're only looking at NAV data but not interacting with it, certainly Flow would be a great solution there. With NAV workflow, it requires admin rights in NAV to set up. There are pre-built workflows for NAV-specific processes like approvals, and then the NAV workflow obviously is run by the NAV job queue, so you have to have those configured. And in general, I would say that the NAV workflow certainly much more powerful than Microsoft Flow, but again, along with that power comes a fair amount of complexity. So if it's simple and it can be done in 2 steps, Microsoft Flow. If it's more advanced, you might want to look at the NAV workflow scenario. So the Microsoft Flow use case, and for any of you that aren't aware, these are Amazon Dash buttons, and I've got a little picture there of one on the washing machine. So basically, the way these work, it's like a physical version of a Flow. Amazon markets these for, you buy one for $5, it connects to your Wi-Fi, and when you need more Tide, you push that button and it automatically places an order with Amazon for Tide. You don't pay a monthly subscription for it. You pay $5 for it once, and you actually get a $5 credit the first time you push the button. But there are different things here. They've got obviously branding agreements with these different. You run out of Bounty paper towels or Glad garbage bags or Gatorade. You push the button, and so that's a really simple way to understand what Flow is like. I'm sorry, I don't really need the second slide, but the fact that they make one for Nerf, if any parents have children who are heavily invested in the Nerf world and they run out of those soft bullets, being able to push a button and reorder more seems awesome. As well as just like you eat enough Doritos that you need a dash button for it. That seems pretty cool as well. So that really didn't need to be on there. But in terms of use cases, like this is sort of what I'm thinking. If you can imagine that dash button, putting that dash button near an important inventory storage location in your warehouse, being able to have a warehouse worker push a button to initiate that flow. Now, the button might be a virtual button on their cell phone. You could create one and push it to through just a two-step power app that would allow them to push a button and would, again, like those Amazon Dash buttons, you can't push an Amazon Dash button for Doritos and tell it, well, this time I want this kind or this size. It doesn't support any of that. You have to pre-configure what the button is going to do. So it's very basic, but again, it can actually really save time and boost efficiency within your organization to have people make those sort of repetitive tasks as easy as pushing a button. Another use case for flow, maybe not so much along nav lines, but calling tech support, having if you need flow or if you need support in a conference room, being able to push a button to get this where it's already configured where you're located, so geographically it knows, and then initiates a support request so someone can either reach out via a phone call or if it's in your physically where you are, someone can run down the hall and help. But again, all of that needs to be configured prior to initiating the flow. Another one is tracking hours and actually using the GPS information of where you are. Maybe it is so you need to be using something like your smartphone, but having an app on your phone that just creates when you get to a client site, pressing the button and capturing your GPS information. And so you can look back at this, and then maybe it's creating and putting it in an Excel file or a Google sheet. So at the end of the week, if you're a delivery person, if you're a service person, if you're out of the office a lot and you need to keep track of that, setting up flow to track that can be something that all you need to do is hit a button and do it. Certainly from a sales standpoint, an effortless way of keeping track of product sales, so you can, in the way that Amazon is doing it, being able to set those sort of buttons up for your customers and having them place orders in NAV, sales orders or sales quotes, depending on what your sales process is like. Like, can you imagine if you've got a key customer being able to say, hey, anytime you need to buy more steel from me, 36 by 96, 24 gauge steel, hit this button, and we'll order you 50 sheets or a pallet, whatever it is. That would, in some cases, that would help you sell a lot more products. Now, I talked about virtual and physical, and actually, surprisingly enough, there are some physical buttons that you can purchase. This one by the company BTTN, the button company, sells for $90, and this is the more advanced of the two options that you have right now. This one actually has will connect via Wi-Fi, but also has a 2G and 3G connection option. So it needs a power supply, but this actually could be in a remote warehouse that doesn't have Wi-Fi to it. And again, they're using this one. They've got it labeled for the call support in that scenario I mentioned earlier about calling for tech support. But this is a physical device that can interact with Microsoft Flow and create whatever it is you want this flow to create. Again, they use templates. These are templates in the button app that uses Microsoft Flow. Once you select Microsoft Flow as the template that you're going to use, then it opens up some Flow screens here, where again you've got the trigger and the action. So 2 steps. That's all you get in Flow. When a button is pushed is the trigger, and then what action do you want? That's all you need to tell it to do. And then, in this case, you've got multiple rooms that could be using the tech support button. So you tell it what room is assigned to this button or this app, and then which email address should go to the email should go to, and it's as simple as that. The other option when it comes to physical buttons is Flick, and actually you see it here. It's a really small, compared to a cell phone, really small. $34.99. Actually now you can get like a 4-pack for $100, and this is a Wi-Fi only device. But again, and they come in different colors as one way to simplify. 4 different colors, I believe, and again, the same thing. You can set up something. I like the example of putting it on a production floor and letting people with pre-configured purchase orders be able to do something. I'm thinking about keeping one in my house that I use to keep track of maybe a virtual swear jar, if you will, if my wife or I misspeak in front of the kids, hit the button. Although that would have to be with us at all times. So that's only good in the kitchen if we're frustrated while cooking. But Flick is another option, and again, something that you can set up for your customer. Doesn't the Flow needs to be internet connected in order for the notifications to happen, but it doesn't have to be on your network. And so it doesn't have to be on the same network that your NAV instance is on. It obviously through the OData connection, it connects over the internet. So these are things that you could put in the hands of your customers if you wanted to try and automate a process like that. Again, similar to the button flow, you've got a trigger and an action, and you configure that, and it basically does what you want it to. And again, this screen here these are flow screens. Once you leave the Flick app, it goes into Flow, and in this example, you're tracking work hours for several projects and creating lines on a worksheet, and then putting dynamic content in there where it would ask you to input when you add a dynamic content field to a flow. That allows you to interact with it. So just before we get into my demo, I just want to show that going to flow.microsoft.com, checking out their blog, and signing up for Flow. If you don't have an Office 365 account, that's how you get it. I'm going to let me see here. I'm going to end the slideshow, and I'm just going to show you in what my Flow looks like. And let me just find the right screen here. Drag it on. So here is a flow that I created that is credit limit modified. So in this flow, if I go into edit flow, it shows me that the table that I'm looking at is credit limit in local currency, and the condition. So first of all, I'm using when a record is modified, which is a pre-built flow template. That exists in Microsoft Flow that's working with Dynamics NAV. So when a record is modified, and then the condition that I set is when the credit limit is greater than $10,000 in local currency. When that happens, I want an email to be sent. So essentially, if you look at the connectors I'm using Dynamics NAV and Office 365 email. And in this case, if we're not doing that, then I don't care. So it's an if-then statement, and I could have something if no, but I guess I couldn't really think of a scenario. Although maybe if someone's credit limit is lowered because of bad payment history, maybe I'd want to know that, and I'd want the salesperson to know that so he could check in with the customer. But basically, that's all I need, and if I do that, so I'm just going to close and without making any changes, you'll see in the flow field. So now, if I look, I've got 2 flows that I've configured: this credit limit modified one, and then an item in SharePoint. When an item is SharePoint list is modified to send an email. So this shows me now. These are just mine. Unfortunately, none of my team members are using Flow, so I don't have any team flows. But if I go on this flow screen, it will once I jump into the credit limit modified, it'll show me my run history. So how long it took. I ran it 3 days ago. I ran it again an hour ago before the demo to make sure it worked. And and all that run history can be here. So from a certain perspective, if you'd be concerned about, you have a free flow account that gives you 2,000 runs per month, you could maybe check into it here, and maybe that would be for monitoring, but you can definitely see what's going on. If you want to add descriptions, you can do that here. And so I'm going to drag my nav screen over just to show you as easy as I'm going to go to, let's see here, I'll get to customers. So let me get to a customer list here. And I don't think in our demo environment that we're doing too much with credit limits in terms of our just basic customer database. But let's go into new concepts furniture and see if they've got a, I apologize that it is popping these when you work with 4 screens. Sometimes there's, so credit limit, there's no credit limit configured for them. Now my flow condition is that if it gets over $10,000, so I'm going to make this $11,000, right? Yep, and click OK. So I saved the record, and now I'm going to monitor my email inbox to verify that what has happened. And again, I'm using the free version. So if you see the one that I ran an hour ago, and maybe that will suffice, but what I've got is I'm looking at my Office 365 webmail. I have to tell it how important this is because it's actually recognizing it's coming from an automated service and sending it with low importance. I'd probably want to change that, but here I've just got a basic note that says please confirm change to customer credit limit. And again, that would be maybe that's maybe that is the head of customer service that's reviewing that. Maybe this is someone on your accounting team or your CFO that would want to be kept in the loop, and maybe they're not someone that lives in NAV. Certainly if it was part of the accounting team, I hope they'd live in NAV, but you sort of get the idea. Something changes and you want to automate that process. This is an easy way to do it. Now, further to kind of go along the Office 365 story, I could, from here, once this pops up, I could actually open up my NAV instance within the Outlook web client. I could go over here and launch the web client to see what's going on. I wouldn't necessarily have to be at the office to do that. I could connect. I could connect and check on this this email from wherever I was, as long as I had a data connection or internet connection. So while that chugs away, I'm going to leave that and see if we'll just check back here and see if I got my email. No, and I have not yet, but let me just refresh and check that out. So again, we've got a 5-minute time frame here, so it might, and I see that we've only got 5 minutes left. So while that is still chugging away, I'm going to go back to my flow screen and then show you in terms of creating from scratch. Let's create from a template, and this is sort of cheating because I've already got 2 connections configured. But if I just search in the templates, here is create an item in Dynamics NAV from a Power App. So let's just click in here once and see what's going on. So first of all, this flow will connect to Dynamics NAV, and it tells me that I've already got the connection configured, and there's a green check mark there. So I will hit continue. And so right here, it's telling me to create an item, what table name do I want to reference? And as I, so now I've got, I'm getting a NAV request failure, probably from security. So I've got to, so here's where I could actually enter the table name, and let me just go back to a flow that works, like my flow. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me look at my connectors. Maybe that'll be more beneficial. So these are all the connectors. I want to just see. I just want to go to my connectors. So, oh, and there, that notification, if you heard that, was an indication that I got my email. Let's see here. Yep, there we go. So credit limit changed. Again, another low importance email for myself, but it's actually that easy to do. So let me get back to Flow. And actually, while I'm doing this, Angie, do we have any questions?
None have come through, Jeff. So if anyone has any, you are more than welcome to go ahead and ask them now so we can get them called out.
All right. Again, if not, as Angie said, we will be recording this and as well as making the slide deck available on request if you'd like it.
Okay. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative, and thank you all who have attended. Just a reminder, it is recorded, so it will be available on our website later this afternoon. And be sure to check us out for tomorrow's webinar. We will have another Innovia employee presenting, Desiree Geiger. She's going to be presenting on closing the year in NAV, close income statement, and that will be at the same time. So register for that. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you all for attending.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Angie.